The Sunshine State Showdown with Brandon Kravitz and Zac Blobner.
Welcome back to the show. Certainly a different one here today on the Sunshine State's Showdown. There's still so many ways that you can keep up with us. You can find our video stream now streaming on Facebook and Twitter of one of our many great affiliates. Gain that premier access at 96.9 The Game, at The Game Jacks, and at 940 Wins. You can find the podcast uploaded daily on the iHeartRadio app. I've been wanting to hear it. You've been wanting to hear it. My man over here chomping at the bit. Let's get into another Blobner Big Bite.
Blobner's Big Bite.
You're going to need a bigger boat.
I'm so tired, Brandon, of talking about Major League Baseball, but not games, right? Like, not practice, but not games either. We're talking about negotiations. What is this? Are we like Wolves of Wall Street? But like the sports version, we're digging into the numbers of the why of the negotiating for contracts and years. And now you're starting to throw different terms in there. What the hell is going on in baseball? Hockey's got it planned and figured out. Basketball's got it planned and figured out. Football hasn't missed a beat. Baseball, every second I look, they're balking at different things, whether it's the players and the owners. Yes, that was a fun baseball pun if you missed it. But now you got the players that are somehow in some bizarro world thinking they're going to eke out about 114 games that goes from the end of June to the end of October. And look, I don't know how much testing they're doing for marijuana and baseball these days, but they might want to get on these cats if they think this is going to work. And then they talk about deferring money to 2021. Now, there might be something to be said about that. Maybe that's a talking point for the owners to start on and start looking at. But I'm going to go back to the same thing I've been pounding for days now, Brandon. As far as the players go, if you want legs to stand on, you want us, the public, to listen to you and to agree with you and to back you 100% united against the owners, do what Sean Doolittle and the Washington Nationals are doing. Do what David Price is doing for the LA Dodgers, a guy who hasn't even played a game yet in LA. Take care of the minor leaguers that are out of work, that aren't making a dime. You want us to fight and back you on your fight for money? Make sure you're putting your money to good use. And that would be taking care of your minor league counterparts. The more of that we see as the outside looking in, the more the players will have the leverage, at least from the public standpoint. Right now, it's hard not to be on the owner's side, especially after the latest proposal, Brandon.
Very well said. And look, I think I speak for Zach and for all of us. We want to see sports back. We need healing in this country. Those are the athletes that can give it to you. And the fact that they're held up over some money, you can get it down the road. We want to see action. We want to see it now. And you would be doing a great service to this country by coming back today. Zac Blobner, Brandon Kravitz. We're back with a retired Central Florida police officer next.
Welcome back to the Showdown with your hosts, Brandon Kravitz and Zac Blobner.
What? Did we just become best friends? Yep.
Time for some added insight. Let's head to the Sunshine State Hotline.
I know when that hotline blink.
A very special guest joining the show. His name is Rene Ingoglia. Some of you in the Central Florida area may know him as the former color analyst of the Orlando Apollos. He's been a police officer in Central Florida for 20 years, 12 of those spent as a detective, and has been pulled back into his uniform to provide that extra help for the Central Florida protests that we're not the only city certainly going through this right now. He's been with ESPN as well as a college football analyst. He's really done and seen it all. Rene, I hate to bring you on under these circumstances, but you know these issues better than most. So first of all, I want you to explain to our audience exactly how this works for you. So you were a police officer, now you're a detective, and you're being asked to man the streets along with your fellow officers again. And exactly how does that work? And how did what was the reason why you got pulled back in? Just for the extra bodies, or how does that work?
Sure, absolutely, Brandon. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so as you said, I've been a police officer for 20 years, and what happens in your career is everyone starts out as a patrol officer. That's where you start. That's where you learn. About 8 years into my career, I became a detective and just worked my way up the ranks, and have been a detective now for 12 years. I'm a violent crimes detective. I handle robbery cases, but it's unfortunate, obviously, what's happening all across our country. And the protesters are great. Listen, we love the protesters. It's your constitutional right. I understand. We understand why people are angry. We are angry too. What happened in Minneapolis is condemned by every law enforcement agency, every cop I know across this country. That was criminal. That officer's been charged with third-degree murder and manslaughter. They're investigating the other officers. They've all been fired. We all condemn that. That unity, we understand that, and we hurt too with the public, and we understand the protest. But it's peaceful protest. Unfortunately, we have a criminal element out there that wants to loot, that wants to riot, that wants to smash windows. So what happens in cases like that is it's kind of all hands on deck. So everybody that's a detective that normally comes to work in shirt and tie every day and investigates their cases, we're pulled back from our cases. We're in full uniform, riot gear is distributed, and we just kind of get put in extra bodies where it's needed to protect certain areas, certain buildings, certain populations, like wherever they need us, it's all hands on deck. And it's much like it happens in Central Florida, as everyone knows. When there's hurricanes, we'll get activated as well when that happens. So that's kind of where we are right now, and there's like no timetable of what's going to happen. It's going to kind of run its course here. But let's just hope it can just be peaceful protest, and we can get through this and get better as a country. I've said this before. We got to come together as one nation, one people. We've just been too divided, and we need to come together and do better.
First of all, I just want to say thank you, and that I really appreciate everything you do for the community and being out there. And obviously, we've seen tons of videos from across the country, a very scary scene, even in Orlando, as things kind of get heightened. We just really appreciate you. I just want to make sure we make that clear here at the beginning of the conversation. With that being said,
everyone appreciates that, guys. Thank you.
No, seriously, it's the least we can do. With that being said, I hate to take you back to the moment when you first saw the video of the murderer that murdered that black man in Minneapolis. But I just want to get your first reaction, how you saw it. I just want to transport me to how you learned of it and just take me and put me in your shoes. And I think it'd be great for the audience to hear just, as part of the force, how you first saw it and what your first thoughts were.
Sure. I saw it on TV just like everyone else. And I'll be honest with you. I got nauseous. I really, it's cliche, sick to your stomach. I literally got sick to my stomach. It's just a bad cop, right? It's a criminal act. It was a criminal act that he did where, the first thing you look at is like, you're never taught. I've never been taught to go towards anyone's neck whatsoever. And then when you hear the facts, right, and you watch it and you say 8 minutes, it's just you cringe, and you just and then obviously you feel for George Floyd and his family because his life was taken and it shouldn't have been. So you have that aspect of it where you just feel horrible, and then you start thinking of, oh my gosh, what has this now done to the relationship between the community and law enforcement, especially the minority community, the African American community. I mean, we've worked so hard to be able to bring the law enforcement community and African American community and all minority communities together with outreach and community policing. And then this one instance has just tarnished it. It has hurt relations so bad. And guys, people say it and it sounds cliche, but let me tell you something. I've been in this profession 20 years. I was a pro football player for about 4 years. I played college football for 4 years. I've been to ESPN 10 years. So I've been in the circles of athletics. I've worked with many races of people. 99.9% of cops do a great job. They really do. But I agree. Just one case of this happening is too many. And that's what we have to work on getting rid of and eradicating. And we have to do it together as a nation. And I think if anything good can come out of this, it's now communication across this country between law enforcement and the communities to move forward. And but again, just to get back, just sick to my stomach. And every time I see it, the same feeling comes over me.
And I'm right there alongside you. A lot of us are. I think anybody who has a heart felt that way, especially the first time they saw it, and probably if they've watched it more times since, felt that way. I want to ask you, though, I'm a very solution-oriented person. I always like to look forward. Once we can kind of recognize the problem, it's like, well, how do we fix it? And you mentioned trying to weed out the bad apples. And that's a conversation that comes up anytime we're in any scenario even close to this. One of the things that I've been very confused about from the outside looking into law enforcement is why guys, and not guys, but why cops that have aggressive things on their record or have done bad things and been, released from their department or sent elsewhere are so easily able to be hired back on in different departments. Is that maybe the area that we can focus to get some of this bad apples out? And do you have any idea on just the process that can be improved as far as a solution?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the issues. It's very complicated because there's over 800,000 men and women in law enforcement in the nation, right? So some agencies have different hiring budgets than others. So a lot of times, just in my experience, what you see is, as you said, someone might have got fired from a larger agency because of disciplinary issues. And then they go to a smaller agency that says, hey, this guy's already sworn. He didn't lose his certification for what he did. He's still a certified officer. So we can overlook that stuff and we'll still hire him. So that's a lot of times how people stay in the profession. But yeah, I mean, as part of that solution is I do agree. I think it starts in the beginning, right, with the hiring process. Listen, I don't care what profession you're in, right? If you hire good people, it starts with that. Because at the end of the day, guys, we have to be accountable to ourselves. We have to be personally accountable for everything we do. And if you're a good person and you come into this job, you're going to stay a good person. And a lot of it's training, a lot of it's education, and you just move up the line. And another thing too, I think law enforcement has done a good job, and I think us at OPD have done a really good job, is hiring more minorities, hiring more African Americans that come from a lot of these communities that are affected. I think that does tremendous good in the outreach and bringing those communities together. So there's a lot you can do, and we have to get at a table. People that are very smart need to get together with the community, the churches, law enforcement's top brass, politicians, and just move this forward in a good direction, good dialogue, and fix all injustices that are out there.
Rene Ingoglia joining us, 20 years on the force, the Central Florida Police Department, kind of take some time. And in the midst of protests that are about to start or already have started in downtown Orlando. So we really appreciate that. Now, you talk about the training that's involved for these officers. And I think I'm a lot like Zach in that I like to be a little bit solution-oriented. And I think oftentimes we do get immersed in the conversation. That can be a good thing, but how do we then take the next step and answer the questions that I think a lot of people want to hear? What is the training process like as far as how you're supposed to handle situations like the one that this officer found himself in, or just in general? Are you trained as a police officer to approach minorities maybe more delicately because of the detached relationship that's occurred over the years? I know that that's a difficult question, and it's uncomfortable to even say it out loud, but is that something that's discussed when you go through your training?
Yeah, well, I've said this before, and one thing I think, not only in this profession, but in the nation, there's a saying, get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think one of the most uncomfortable things we talk about in America, in our society, is race, right? And from all aspects. We're all different. We all come from a different background. Training, it's hard to pin down training because there's not one unified training, right? Because, here in Florida, we're all sworn law enforcement officers in Florida. So we're trained under FDLE, Florida Department of Law Enforcement standards. And then you go to your agencies, and some agencies have more robust training than others. Race is definitely something that we talk about and we get educated on. And I think we need more of that. But let's be honest, right? When you're if you're a UCF graduate and you're 24, 25 years old, and you grew up in white upper middle class, let's say, and you become a police officer, and then all of a sudden you're a midnight officer, right? And you're in a patrol car, and all of a sudden you're working in the Paramore area, which is primarily African American. I mean, those are different cultures that all of a sudden collide, right? So that officer needs to be trained in different issues and different cultures and and everything. So that, I think, will help out tremendously. I just wish I think everyone wishes they had just a simple solution, a simple answer. The best that I can tell you from my experience is educate and train. And at the end of the day, you have to be a good person. And I always tell young officers, I don't care where you are, what house you're in, what community you're in. When I look at people, when I look at victims, when I look at suspects, I treat everyone with respect, okay? And I always think of people I'm dealing with, whether they're being arrested or they're a victim, as if they were a family member of mine. What if this was my brother? How would I want him to get treated? What if that was my mom? What if it was my sister? And, and I think that will help out tremendously. But guys, I think it's training, and you just got to keep training. And it's the hiring process, and you just have to, you learn. Yeah, you're taught to de-escalate when you can. I can't sit here. I will tell you this: every single police encounter is unique to itself. So there's no way I can tell you, I can train you. This is how we handle this situation, guys. It's a fluid thing, and it changes. And the most you can do is train for it. But at the end of the day, if you can hire good people with good hearts and then train them and educate them, I think that's the best solution.
Well, we got the golden rule, right? Treat others as you want to be treated. We got love thy neighbor. So if you want to go commandment, I mean, we can go back as far as you want in any way you want. And it's like you said, that's the simple solution, is treat people the way that they deserve to be treated as if they were your family member. I do want to step out of maybe the solutions here. And I want to ask you a question, because I think you have a very unique perspective. You're both being in the force, you cover college football, you played football, so you have been around football quite a bit. So those two worlds collided a few years ago with Colin Kaepernick. And I think hindsight is 20/20, in any capacity. I'll be honest, for me, you mentioned being uncomfortable in uncomfortable situations. That was a very uncomfortable time for me, because I didn't know how to feel. There were certain things that he was doing and saying that I supported, but there were also a lot of things he was doing and saying that I didn't necessarily wasn't fully on board with. But now we look at today, and we look at the message that he was trying to send and the way he was trying to send it. You compare it to the riots and all the things happening, and I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. Like, one happened because Kaepernick's not in the league anymore per se. But I just want to kind of get your perspective on Colin, and if it has changed in the last few years now that we're in the scenario we're in. I just want to see where you stand.
Sure. Listen, I love this country. We have a constitution and freedom of speech, and I never will ever condemn anyone for their point of view and going out. I support Colin Kaepernick for what he says and what he does, and I understand where he's coming from. Now, I may not agree with everything he says, and that's okay, guys. We don't all have to agree, but I support and understand what he's trying to get across. Maybe I would do it different. Maybe you would do it differently. But that's what makes this country so great and better. And listen, conversation is good. This act that we saw in Minneapolis, it was criminal. There's no doubt about it. law enforcement is unique in that, unfortunately, here's the deal. And I told my 15-year-old daughter this today. I said, all this talking, and we're going to try to move forward as a country and get better. Unfortunately, guys, there's still going to be criminals 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 100 years from now when we're off this earth. There's still going to be police officers trying to protect and serve and doing the best. And inevitably, there'll probably be police officers in 100 years screwing up because we're human. And that's what I try to tell people. Police officers are a microcosm of society. Now, we try to get trained up like we talked about, and we try to be good people. But there's a difference between an officer that screws up, because we all screw up at our job. And when you screw up in law enforcement, yeah, you get punished and you get held accountable. But what we saw in Minneapolis wasn't a screw up, right? That was a criminal act. So we have to, and to kind of relate it to Colin Kaepernick and what I said before, every situation police encounter is unique to itself. So I think we have to be very careful lumping every police contact in with it's criminal. Okay. And just like we as police officers in society, we can't lump one community, one race. You can't see a young African-American man and say he's bad, because that's ridiculous, right? That would be profiling. Just like you can't look at one cop, white cop like me, for instance, and say he's racist. He's a cop. So, I mean, and that's right. That's the get comfortable being uncomfortable situations we have to have. I'm proud in my 20 years in law enforcement knowing that I've done it the right way. And anyone I've ever encountered in the sports world, and I have a lot of African-American friends and colleagues, and everyone knows what kind of person I am. And I think that's where it kind of comes back to that personal accountability. And guess what, guys? Personal accountability on the other side, too, doing things right in terms of let's not break the law. Let's try to be good citizens all the way around. In a perfect world, right? Police wouldn't have to intervene with things, but unfortunately, we know that's not the case, that we need to be there. But I think in this instance, if this can teach us anything, is personal accountability all the way around. And I do believe, and I think some of my brethren in law enforcement will probably get mad if I say this, I do think law enforcement should be held to a higher standard, because we should know better. We understand the law. We deal with people. But again, guys, I'll say it, 99% of the men and women of the over 800,000 that are out there across this country do it the right way. Unfortunately, if you do it wrong, if there's one officer or a group of officers like Minneapolis that did it wrong criminally, it's one too many, and we have to fix that.
Rene Ingoglia has been a police officer in Central Florida for 20 years. He's in the thick of the protests in Central Florida right now and took some time to chat with us. I appreciate it so much, not only for you taking the time to be on this show, but everything that you're doing to help keep our community safe. Thank you so much, and good luck out there.
Stay safe out there, man. We appreciate it.
Rene Ingoglia, ladies and gentlemen, that was powerful. That was powerful, and it's a deep, complex issue. I mean, with every sentence that he spoke, 14 different questions, 17 different responses came to mind. Zach, I'm sure you were the same way. There's just so many different ways that you can tackle this. I love the question you asked about Colin Kaepernick. I think it does give us some sense of perspective now, wherever you fell when that happened. And there was a very visceral response. That preseason game, I remember the opponent. They were playing the Chargers. That's how visceral this was. I did what you did, and what many, quite frankly, white sports talk radio hosts did the very next day. Is we came on the radio and we started spewing all this stuff about how he hates the country and all of that. Now, I was able to gain perspective within the next several weeks as the conversation persisted, and everybody's thoughts and views, perhaps they changed. Not everybody certainly did that. But I think what we can appreciate today, no matter where you fell on that, Zach, at the time, is that he did what he did, and he hurt 0 people, 0 businesses, 0 cars.
100%.
He didn't scare anybody. Okay, he might have made you uncomfortable, but that's the worst that happened. And you look at what happened this weekend in so many cities around this country, and you would have given up your right arm for a football
100%.
player to kneel on the sidelines, and that's what it comes down to at the end of the day for me.
8 days a week. Give me that over the rioting and everything we're seeing now. 8 days a week. And that's the flip side, is like we would have rather had that. Now, there are still some parts of it that I'm not completely willing to flip my stance on. Like, we've heard people that are like, oh, the NFL took his livelihood away because of this. He's still a very rich man because of Nike and because of the money he had made previously. With that being said, though, he also donates a lot. He puts a lot of his money where his mouth is. So there's a lot that I do appreciate when it comes to Colin Kaepernick. There are certain things that I still have struggled to deal with. Clearly, he wore, socks that were very degrading to police officers.
Yeah.
That didn't help his case. But that goes back to none of us are perfect. We all make mistakes, including cops, including football players, including sports radio hosts. I mean, I've heard half of your takes, man. We're not perfect. So no, but all jokes aside, it's a thing where none of us are perfect. And as much as that was a polarizing topic, and it's still polarizing, when you compare it to what we're looking at now, again, I can't think or imagine a person exists that wouldn't rather have a football player kneeling during the Pledge of Allegiance and peacefully debate that on sports radio or at your local pub or at brunch or whatever it may be, as opposed to riots and being scared to leave your house, having curfews imposed, not knowing if your friends that are at these protests or are police officers are going to live through the night. Those are things that, like, I can't fathom picking over, again, protesting by kneeling during the anthem.
Exactly, and we'll pay attention to and honor some of those in the athletic sphere that have stood up and have spoken within the last couple of days. Guys like Udonis Haslem. We'll do all of that in a special edition of Coast to Coast next.
Now, back to the Sunshine State Showdown with Brandon Kravitz and Zac Blobner.
Well, that was some powerful stuff. Again, thank you to Rene and Ingoglia for making some time for us today down there in downtown Orlando, trying to keep these protests as peaceful as possible. Please, if you're out there, whether you're in Jacksonville, Miami, Orlando, Tampa Bay, wherever you may be, if you're out there and you're speaking your mind, you're holding up signs, you're letting your voice be heard, do it in a safe and respectful way. That is all I ask. I am completely on board with whatever you decide to do. We support you here on this show. We just don't want to see any more businesses destroyed. We do appreciate all of you who make this part of your daily routine. We know that today's show has been a little bit different, but so what? The world feels a little bit different today. And hopefully as the week rolls on, and we've been trying to give you all the normalcy we possibly can, but man, this country and the world for that matter, just continues to not allow that to happen. Let's get into some coast to coast.
Coast to coast and throws it down.
It's the Monday Mailman. Zac Blobner's got the goods. What's up?
And we're going to do this coast to coast a little differently than we normally do as well, Brandon, to stay in the theme of the show. We're going to just shout out different athletes that are in their communities over the last few days doing the right kind of thing, starting down in Miami with Udonis Haslem, who is eager to help community and police work together. He's down in Miami. He spoke at a rally, and he's on the forefront of trying to connect the people that are hurting the most with the police so that we can bridge the gap. His words, not mine. Bridge the gap. So shout out to Udonis Haslem down in the South Beach that's just trying to, again, come up with solutions, not fan the flames and the problems, Brandon.
Yeah, and that I think it's one of the steps. I'm not sure it's step one. I think training properly for all police officers around the country, that feels like step one. Hiring the right people, firing the wrong people, those feel like the right steps. But right after that, it seems like what Udonis Haslem is doing, and we've seen other athletes try and do this. Kenny Stills down in Miami when he played for the Miami Dolphins did a whole lot of that, trying to bridge that gap because yeah, I mean, the disconnect, the divide, the lack of trust, we heard Rene talk about it. I mean, you've got, obviously, if you're a minority that lives in an impoverished area, you don't trust the police. That goes without saying. You've got plenty of reason not to. But on the flip side, you've got these police officers that have never stepped foot into that type of environment that are terrified and not properly trained. When you put all of that together, it's a recipe for disaster. And then you add racism on top of it, forget it. We've got no chance. So hopefully we can start to correct some of those issues.
Next up, we're going to head here to Tampa Bay. We're going to talk about a handful of football stars that are getting together. The McLeod brothers, Rene, who plays for the Bills now, Jordan over at USF, and then Auden Tate, he's with the Bengals. I believe he played at Florida State. So all local guys here that went out the day after rioting. So yesterday in the morning, in the afternoon, and helped clean up an area over on Fowler by USF that was just destroyed by flames and just broken glass, all kinds of stuff. They went there as a group, cleaned up, invited the community, got their hands dirty with, again, members of that community around here in Tampa Bay. And nobody asked them to do that. They woke up and wanted to make a difference, and they went out there and did it, Brandon.
Unbelievable. I like to fancy myself as a good person, but there are so many people out there that are just better than I am, and I'm happy to admit that. And that's the kind of individual you take that sort of time out of your day to help those that are in that area, the business owners who have had to clean up their facilities, their brick and mortars, and hats off to them. That is just so cool that they have gone out of their way to do that, and we need a whole lot more of it.
Let's go back to the NBA. Spurs guard Lonnie Walker on Sunday was out with volunteers in San Antonio, helping clean graffiti off of the walls of businesses that had been rioted against. And that's just another example of an athlete being out there and helping out.
Absolutely. And look, we hope that these protests, at least the violent nature of them, the defacing of property, all that kind of stuff, dies down, but we understand your anger. We understand the frustration. We are with you 100%. Tweet at us at Brandon Kravitz, at Zach on the mic. We're happy to extend this conversation. We don't run from it. We lean into it. Zach, for you, my partner in crime on this show, for our audience out there, we appreciate you listening. Download the podcast on iHeartRadio. It's the Sunshine State Showdown. We're back tomorrow at 5.